From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 105. We recently had our first catcher on the show, and it went so well that I want to make sure we got another one on here to keep the momentum rolling. So we've got an awesome guy on today, someone who took a little longer in the minor leagues and made his Major League debut, and he's been one of the really good feel-good stories in Major League Baseball this year, and a guy that you have to root for. So excited to have him on, and definitely a good lesson in perseverance with lots of wisdom to share along the way. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it's difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states, on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where Athletic Greens can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. And that's why I use it daily and recommend it to our athletes. 1 scoop of Athletic Greens contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients, including a multivitamin, multimineral, probiotic, green superfood blend, and more. They work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet, increase energy and focus, aid in digestion, recovery, and supporting of a healthy immune system. This all can happen without taking multiple products. While most nutritional products come to market and stay stagnant, Athletic Greens continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing 53 improvements over the last decade. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best daily nutritional habit on the planet. It's lifestyle friendly whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, and contains less than 1 gram of sugar without compromising on taste. They put 75 ingredients to the NSF for Sport certification to come up with a formula that's trusted by some of the world's best athletes, including our own. Right now, Athletic Greens is giving our listeners 10 free travel packets with their subscription. Simply go to athleticgreens.com/Cressey to receive my offer. These travel packs are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health when you're traveling for games, training, or simply when you're on the go. They can be a great counterbalance to less than ideal on-the-road food options. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance to get nutrient diversity, then head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey and get your 10 free travel packets today. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, Cressey. Today's guest was born and raised in Michigan and was named Gatorade High School Baseball Player of the Year there in 2011 after batting .495 with 14 home runs, 54 runs batted in as a catcher and third baseman. He was drafted by the Cleveland Indians in the 7th round of that year's draft and chose to forego his commitment to Ohio State to sign and start his professional career. After 7 years in the minor leagues, the Indians added him to their 40-man roster at the end of 2017. He was called up to the big leagues on September 1st, 2018. After multiple stints in the big leagues with the Indians over 2 seasons, he was traded to the Tigers in January of 2020. In the spring of 2021, he established himself as a mainstay on the Tigers MLB roster. Along the way, he caught a no-hitter and was named American League Rookie of the Month for July, becoming the first Tiger to win the award since 2010. For the month, he hit .265 with a .627 slugging percentage and 9 home runs and 29 RBIs. Please welcome to the show, Eric Haase. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to do this just because we've probably known each other here for 4 or 5 years, but this was obviously a big time breakout year for you, and I'm curious to get a little bit more insights on how that came about and what you did to not just have the success that you had initially, but to project it forward in a new organization with new opportunities. But before we get to that, I'm actually intrigued to get kind of a Midwest high school baseball perspective. So you grew up in Michigan. And my frame of reference is really the Northeast. So we see a lot of hitters, from cold weather climates who often get overlooked just because, they say the kid from New Hampshire has never seen 90-mile-per-hour arms in high school. So, when he hits 600 in high school, it's against, 80 to 82. I'm curious, did you have that held against you at all in Michigan? Did you face enough competition to be really critically evaluated well during your baseball career in Michigan?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, luckily for me, the Detroit Catholic League was pretty good competition. I mean, there's always guys going to SEC schools. There's always some pretty good arms, and then the summer ball teams that I played for, we'd always be traveling around, playing a lot of the Southern guys and stuff. So, yeah, it wasn't as consistent as some of the guys might see down south, but I was fortunate enough to just kind of see that and overall be a little bit more prepared than a normal, I guess, cold weather hitter.
I got you. Were you a multi-sport athlete? What was the kind of the approach growing up to overall development?
Yeah, I was up until high school.
Mm-hmm.
I played hockey, football, golf, just kind of whatever season it was. Kind of just getting a good mix of everything. But then once I got to high school, baseball started to get a little bit more serious and just kind of took off from there.
And I know you were, kind of celebrated as like a power hitter, and you're a catcher / third baseman coming out of high school. Were you a guy that found the weight room in high school? Did it come later? What was your experience in the strength and conditioning world?
Oh, definitely. I didn't really know too much about it pre-high school, but luckily I had a great coach, and Tony DeMar kind of helped me out a lot in high school. And he ran it just like at college. We had a pretty good strength and conditioning regimen. We kind of made do with what we had, but we won a couple state championships and kind of saw that turnover. Coming from a really small Catholic school to be doing that on the state level was awesome, and I just kind of saw that importance really early on, and that's kind of how my power ended up coming through a little bit. I felt like I always could hit. I always felt like I had pretty decent hands, but the work that I put in the strength and conditioning aspect really started to kind of take it to the next level.
Absolutely. And you signed in the 7th round out of high school. You've been committed to Ohio State. I'm curious, what factored into your decision? I mean, was it a tough decision, sign versus don't sign? What went into that?
Yeah, there's a lot that went into it. I didn't really get too recruited by local schools, which is kind of weird. But Greg Beals, he was at Ball State before, and then when he took the job at Ohio State, I think I was one of the first kind of guys that he started recruiting. So once I took my official visit down there and saw the facilities and everything, coming from where I'm from, it was like I'm definitely gonna come here. And I really didn't know much about the draft. Like you said, there's not a whole lot of guys who get drafted out of high school, kind of where I'm from. So once that started to be a possibility, I obviously wanted to take the pro route as quickly as I could.
Nice. And then, so when you actually get to pro ball, this is the one, maybe the question I have that intrigues me the most. Were you a catcher / third baseman coming out? Were you third baseman exclusively? Because the Indians kind of made the decision to switch you to catcher pretty quickly once you got to minor league baseball. What was the original path, and then how did it detour?
Yeah, mostly just played the left side of the infield. I probably caught 10-15% of the games. And overall, it's just kind of athletic. I just pitched. I played left side of the infield, like I said. I caught here and there. But I guess Cleveland just saw a lot of my value being behind the plate. So once I was drafted, I took ground balls the first day. And, they're like, hey, you're going to be a catcher from here on out. So, so I was, I caught for solely 11 years, and then this last year, AJ's kind of moved me around, playing some first base, left field, and just kind of trying to tap into a little bit more of my athleticism.
Absolutely. Jose Trevino was actually a recent guest on the podcast, and he has a little bit of a similar story. His last year at Oral Roberts, they went, predominantly to catching, and then once he got to the Ranger system, they basically pushed for it full time. I'm curious, what was the biggest adjustment when you went from being predominantly third baseman to being, all in on catching? Was there a certain part of the game that came naturally and some that was really, really difficult for you? Was it game calling? Was it pitcher relationships? What did you struggle to pick up on?
I think a lot of it was just like you said, kind of off the field stuff, the preparation, all the game plans. There's so much data now on every hitter. Just kind of streamlining that process. So when you get into the game, it's a little bit more feel, you can kind of let that kind of natural flow of the game and kind of tendencies, what you're seeing and whatnot at the plate kind of come through. But a lot of the prep, we do before the games with the scouting reports and meeting with the pitchers and everything. That kind of took me a long time to grasp. It felt like I just want to kind of get out there and do things naturally, and it doesn't work like that at this level.
Yeah, I mean, when do you? I'm actually curious about this. Just having worked with some, quite a few veteran pitchers who really like to read swings, and
Hmm.
part of their success is obviously working closely with their catcher, who they expect to be reading those swings the same way. Otherwise, you're shaking 15 times before every pitch.
For sure.
Where do you get to that point in your career? I mean, does that happen in the minor leagues, or do you not really get that experience until you're actually in the big leagues and you're getting around veterans who have actually, who are able to do that more so than a classic minor league pitcher?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. And coming up with Cleveland, I was lucky to be around just a lot of veteran pitchers who, the whole scouting report and analytics and stuff. It kind of came full circle. They're big on it sometimes, and on a one at bat basis, analytics might be great, but right then and now we need a pitch to get a guy out in a big situation. Might go completely against what the analytics say, and it's just kind of what we're seeing. So it took me a little bit to kind of trust my gut instinct with that. But it kind of takes you being burned a couple of times at the big league level to realize, okay, the analytics aren't always going to be right, and your gut's not always going to be right. But
Yeah.
what are you comfortable getting beat with?
I mean, is it a hard decision to have too? Like you were kind of up and down for a couple of years there between, Cleveland when you made your debut and obviously when you got to Detroit initially. Are you less likely to be bold and assertive with that stuff when it's not kind of like a regular roster spot, or does the game not really change in those dynamics?
Initially, yes, but once the pitchers started trusting me more and more, they
Yeah.
start seeing that I've done all my prep work and we're talking about everything before the game, and then just to go out and have those guys trust me, where they're not shaking, or if they are shaking, they're it's the very next sign is exactly what they're looking for. There's always a couple options with some of these guys, but overall, just the trust from them goes a long way. And then, once you kind of have that trust and you're talking through everything in between innings, it becomes really easy and kind of streamlines the process.
Absolutely. So, it's interesting. You had 7 years in the minor leagues, which, isn't unheard of, obviously, for a high school pick, just because there's, a lot of guys go to college for 3 years, and, 4 years for a college pick is not a long time either. So,
Hmm.
when you're talking about 7 years in the minor leagues before you actually get your debut in 18, what do you think it was that, that kept you from moving senior? Was it just, not having an opportunity in that organization? There were guys that were ahead of you. Do you feel like there were, was learning the catching position, or were there, things that you needed to work on that kind of contributed to that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple, all-star caliber guys ahead of me at the big league level. So moving up each level made it a little bit slower and slower. Some places have kind of had some revolving doors, and they're trying to, answer some questions, and they're filling in spots and giving guys opportunities. And it just wasn't like that with Cleveland. They were winning, and they had a couple good guys there. So
Yeah.
it's really nothing I could do about it. Especially having a couple of good years in the upper minor league levels, and it just basically keep doing what you're doing kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I was always just a good backup plan for them, and
Mm-hmm.
people weren't getting hurt, and there just wasn't opportunity. So unfortunately for me, I felt like this is something I could always do. It was kind of a question mark. I didn't know if I could do it at the big league level.
Yeah, so the opportunity does a lot. And you got up at 18, and you kind of stuck this year in 2021. Was it about opportunity, or once you got to the big leagues, did you have to make some hefty adjustments, whether it was either on the hitting side of things or the actual receiving / game calling?
I didn't feel like I had to make too big of adjustments. It was just, like I said, kind of a question mark. I really didn't know what to expect until I was up here playing every day. And you can't really make adjustments until you figure out what these teams are trying to do to you, and how they're going to pitch you, and where they're going to be playing you defensively, or vice versa. On the defensive side, you can't be making adjustments that don't need to be made. It's just kind of one of those things where the game will tell you what you need to do. And unfortunately for me, I didn't get those at bats before, so I didn't
Yeah.
really know what adjustments I had to make.
Yeah, and I am like intrigued. If you look at how the catcher has traditionally been valued in Major League Baseball, it's certainly evolved over the years, right? We always celebrated catchers who were great and offensive in that regard, but I'm not sure as much attention was given to both receiving and game calling as much as we maybe celebrated guys who had absolute cannons, or guys that were able to block in really really big spots. When in reality, some of those things are probably being de-emphasized a little bit more now.
Hmm.
Has that been your experience that the position has evolved since you first entered baseball out of high school, or what's been your perspective on the whole, I guess, catching industry?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just there's so many different ways now, whether it be analytics or front office, whatever they're looking at, that just that add value. There's so many guys that do things completely differently that just add value to teams. Whether that be with the bat, throwing. Some guys have carved out a really good niche of just receiving numbers that
Mm-hmm.
add ridiculous value. Like you said, some guys block and don't receive right as well, and that adds great value. So just trying to be obviously well rounded as possible. But there's definitely some guys who have kind of picked that avenue, and they've just been able to add value every single year. Whether that be some guys are banging with the bat, and um, some guys are elite defensively, and they're just overall just adding team value, and that's huge for them.
Absolutely. I alluded to it briefly, but there's a lot of competing demands, as an MLB catcher, and you hinted at it as well. Both on a daily basis and really on a yearly basis. How do you balance all those different things that you need to take into account with your preparation? Is it the kind of thing where you feel like, hey, this is the part of my game that is the weakest, I give it the most attention, or is it so much? Is it dictated by outside factors of all that matters is serving the pitching staff and what's your kind of mindset with that? Do you have a prioritization structure?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, the pitchers obviously have to come first. That's number one. Being behind the plate. I mean, that's one thing that can't ever slump. You're going to go through highs and lows when you're at the plate, and it's just one thing that's always going to be um, kind of present in the game. But you can't be slumping behind the plate. The pitchers see that and they don't trust you, and that's a horrible feeling. So that's always priority number one. Whether it be extra meeting with them, talking over game plans, or doing some extra scouting, whatever it is. That's always got to be priority number one.
Nice. Maybe a good frame of reference. Like, walk us through like a typical, in season day. Like, what does your prep look like for, say, a 7 o'clock game? How are you going to attack it?
Yeah, so like we're on the road today. I'll probably head into the field around 1 o'clock. I'll go through all of my special Eric Cressey workout regimen, just my mobility and kind of get moving, get
Yeah.
blood flowing and stuff. I lifted yesterday, so I won't do that today. But after that, I'll go straight into the cage while I'm hot, get all my hitting prep out of the way and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot, and then at some point in the day, whenever that starter gets in, I'll go over the lineup with our pitching coach, Chris Vedder, and then we'll just kind of talk it out. What guys are we comfortable beating us? What guys don't we want us to beat or don't want to beat us? Where we can go in certain situations, what pitches might be better to certain guys. Just an overall pretty expansive scouting report.
Mm-hmm.
Who's on the mound. If that's not working today, what are we going to go to? Blah blah blah. Who steals? Who bunts? Who's an opportunist to do both.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of pretty much everything you can imagine. Just talking over the lineup, and then after that, go out for BP, come in, get something to eat real quick, head right back out, and start the pregame bullpen. So it's we're there for quite a long time, but it fills up with stuff pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
Will you take BP on field pretty regularly? Are you a guy that likes to see ball flight stuff, or sometimes is it just cage work early in the day?
Yeah, it depends what point in the season it is. Right now I don't feel hitting on the field is too important. First day in a new place, I like to get out there and just kind of see the backdrop. See what
Mm-hmm.
the ball's doing, and playing left field has
Yeah, it's true.
been kind of different than what I've known in the past. So I'll get out there and take some fly balls off the bat. Go around, see what the pads are bouncing like in the outfield, and throw some bases and stuff. But I don't. I think that pretty much everything that I need to do as far as checking my boxes on
Mm-hmm.
how I feel can be done in the cage at this point. Anytime I can kind of save a little energy for the game, that's going to be crucial.
Yeah, and how does the week work? Obviously, it seems like catching is still like priority number one, but learning left field, playing some first base, like, are you going out and getting reps on the other two on a really consistent basis as well, just to kind of diversify yourself, or is that something where like first base just kind of comes naturally? How do you attack it?
I would definitely prioritize it, catching left field and then first base.
Yeah.
When I was pretty much splitting time behind the plate with Jake Rogers before he got hurt, I was probably catching 5 or 6 games out of 10, playing left field another 2 or 3, and then maybe DHing or getting stuck at first base late in games or coming in and pinch hitting.
Mhm.
But I was definitely doing all my catching work on a pretty daily basis. That's, like I said, that's got to be priority number one, and that's the quickest to kind of go away. When you're not seeing velo, not seeing spin behind the plate, that can kind of sneak up on you a little bit. And, I was probably doing my outfield work once or twice a series, just getting out there, like I said, new ballpark, and kind of seeing the ball fly a little bit, throwing to some bases, and then also once a series I'd get out, on a day that I wasn't catching and go take a couple ground balls at first base and just catch up for the infielders and seeing what their ball's doing and stuff in case I get stuck over there. So it's pretty expansive, but
Mhm.
not too much at each place.
Absolutely. Maybe, and we hinted at this a little bit, but let's talk training. So actually, let's talk in season first. Like, what's in season look like for you? Like, how often are you lifting? Are you a guy that's, it sounds like you're super regimented with like daily warm ups first thing. What do you do to
Mhm.
attack the week?
I really like the way my body feels when I'm under load. So I actually lift more frequently, but my lifts aren't nearly as hard.
Yep.
They're not as quite as intensive. So I'm
Impressive.
pretty much like every other day guy.
Yep.
I like to touch the weight, and most of the time it's just pretty simple exercises.
Yep.
I'm still squatting, I'm still deadlifting, pushing and pulling.
Yep.
Pretty easy stuff to do in
Mhm.
season, but I like to feel that load. I like
Yep.
to still feel strong, and that's one thing that I don't feel like I can ever really get away from.
Mhm.
Even if it's just picking up a kettlebell, swinging it, doing some
Yep.
weight ups and stuff on a day. I just need to feel that weight, and I'm a guy who likes to feel stable. I don't really like to
Yep.
feel loose.
Will you chuck the med ball a little bit in season, or do you kind of keep that to just off season mode?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most of the time now it's maybe one or two sets of five
Yep.
or six reps, just kind of getting it. I mean, everything I do during the season, like is rotational, so I
Yep.
don't feel like I really need to
Yep.
supplement that too much. Where
Yep.
in the off season, where I'm not doing nearly as much baseball stuff, I'll kind of really get after it and kind of get into some hard rotational stuff and trying to peak out that power. But in season, it's basically just making sure I'm moving well and like a good warm up before I get into my baseball stuff.
Absolutely. What about actual sprinting stuff? I know this has been kind of like a little bit of a debated point in the catchers I've talked with over the years. Like, will you do extra sprint stuff just to prepare for base running stuff, or is it backing up first base and stuff like that kind of gives you what you need on a regular basis?
I won't really do extra sprint stuff. I'll get out on the line before and I'll run a couple,
Yep.
3 or 4 pretty hard sprints, make sure my legs are good and loose. But I don't really do any extra, bilateral stuff or any kind of like cone drills or anything like that. Like most of the time, I'm getting pretty much everything I need in the weight room, and then
Mm-hmm.
on the line right before I get into the game. And obviously in the game, if you're playing every day, hopefully you're getting that sprint work in the game.
I've always talked to people who like kind of don't understand like what actually happens like with baseball is that like everything people see on the line is kind of just it's bonus stuff. Like all the
Hmm.
really quality work happens, indoors earlier in the day. There's some guys that don't even come out to the line just because they don't necessarily see tremendous value in some of that stuff. But it's to me
Hmm.
that's much more of like the transition to competition. It's filling out the stadium, the bright lights, all that stuff. So it says a lot that you do so much indoors before you ever get to that point.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
Talking about the off season, so in season obviously is meticulous and well organized. Like, how do you structure? Let's say the season ends, first week in October. How are you going to outline a typical off season approach in terms of when you get back to it, and then what the priorities are throughout different periods of it?
Yeah, I don't really like taking downtime. I've done that in the past. My body doesn't really feel good after taking downtime. Let's say I take 2 or 3 weeks off. It feels like it takes me another 2 or 3 weeks to kind of get back up to be able to working out every day. And I don't really like feeling like I lose, the first 6 weeks of my off season, just
Mhm.
kind of getting back to how I ended it. So I'll still work out to some capacity, but it's mostly just kind of like active rest days. I'll be moving around and still doing all my mobility stuff and trying to make the process as easy as possible to kind of streamline back into getting back into a full on, block once I pick back up.
When will you actually start like swinging? Like, do you take time off from hitting, or do you like to just keep it rolling?
Yeah, so baseball stuff's a little different. We're at that point you're still so far away. You're not
Yeah.
really making crazy adjustments that early in the off season because you still just have so much time. And I feel like when my body's in a good spot physically, like I don't really like taking the time off. Picking back up the baseball stuff seems to be pretty easy. I haven't gotten tight. I haven't really done anything too far away from being able to pick back up baseball stuff. So for the first month or so, I won't really hit or throw. If I do, it's mostly just like some arm care stuff. Throw some fly out cares, and
Yep.
I always kind of stay on top of that, like I said, so I can
Yep.
pick back up pretty quickly. But overall intensity is very low. Just because we're so far removed from spring at that point.
How about the actual catching side of things? Like, especially being cold weather in the off season and maybe not being around a ton of other pro guys. I know some catchers who don't need to. I mean, they don't want to receive until they get to spring training, which I think is a mistake. But there are other guys that just love to eat it up. They'll try to get as many reps as they possibly can. Where would you position yourself on that continuum?
Probably somewhere in the middle. I don't really do a whole lot of catching stuff until probably late November, early
Mm-hmm.
December. But even then, once I get into it, it's pretty thorough. I do a lot of high velo work off the machines.
Yep.
I'm seeing good spin off the machines and stuff. So when I actually start catching bullpens and stuff, I'm really not too far removed from seeing the ball, what it's going to look like, come spring training. So it's easy for me to just kind of set the machine up on a high velo and kind of start retraining my eyes and glove patterns and stuff. So when I get to spring, I don't feel like, oh man, what have I been doing?
I feel like that's actually pretty early relative to some of the ones I've had conversations with. I feel like there are a lot of guys that kind of wait till January 1. So it does say a lot that you're doing this at Thanksgiving and December 1st and all that.
Yeah, I just don't. For me, I think a lot of it too is just kind of I don't feel right unless I get that work in. So even if it is just kind of checking a box for a mental state, I think I always joke with people like never underestimate the placebo effect. So half of what we do in baseball might be chalked up to that. But if you don't feel right not doing it, then what's the point?
It maybe leads into my next question. So you've been a very healthy guy throughout your career. Like you've kind of always answered the bell when the time came. Do you have like overarching principles that you think have been a crucial part of that? What is it that you've done that's made you durable to a position where, let's be real, like you see a lot of guys who, they jam thumbs or, they pull groins or, foul balls off their thigh or whatever it may be. You've kind of always been able to play. What do you think you attribute that to?
Part of it might just be a little crazy. I think a mental state is, I've always been a guy who's had to, fight tooth and nail to get opportunities. So I feel like when I do get an opportunity, then, you're going to have to drag me off the field. Like something's going to be, seriously wrong to not be playing. So, I feel like I've never been in a position where I could turn down opportunities. So, even if you are, banged up, it's not you know, it's not always going to be there, when you feel healthy. So, there's been some of the best games of my career where I've felt absolutely terrible, been banged up, feel like something could be possibly seriously wrong. And, you play through it and end up getting a couple hits or, run into a crucial hit or, do something good behind the plate. And then you feel a little bit better the next day. You're like, okay, maybe it wasn't that serious, but you pulled the parachute too early. It might never get to that point.
I was going to say, at the same time, you got to listen when it whispers, so you don't wait for it to yell. So I'm sure it's kind of a blend of the two. And then obviously the work you put in to take care of your body is big, to stay away from the chronic stuff when the traumatic stuff can sneak up and get you at that position probably more than any other.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you take a hard foul ball or whatnot, there's really nothing you can do about that. But a lot of the prep, like I talked about, just staying on top of the little things, whether that be, getting massage or foam rolling or going through all my mobility stuff, I can just kind of check those boxes and keep my body feeling pretty consistent and, hopefully can deal with those, outside factors a little bit easier.
Absolutely. All right. So when we get close to wrapping up, we always rock a like a lightning round. So we throw a bunch of questions at you. So you may have even listened to these in the past. So what advice would you give to yourself as a teenager if you could go back in time?
Definitely just stay in the weight room. That answers a lot of questions about what you're doing on the field, just what your body's doing in the weight room, how you're moving, and stay on top of lifting heavy. Don't ever back off.
And what about if we're talking to a aspiring catcher, like somebody who's 15, 16 right now that wants to be a big league catcher? Like, is the recommendation the same, or is there something else that you would say?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, pretty much the exact same. Give those guys your all back there, and that'll go a long way. Just creating those relationships is more than half of just actually physically being back there. You want a guy that you can trust back there, and there's no better feeling than when that guy trusts you and he's executing.
Nice. All right, these start to get a little bit harder as we go. What catchers do you like to watch, and why do you enjoy watching them?
Oh, coming up, I really liked watching Roberto Perez with Cleveland. I mean, he's just so calm back there. He's just
Great
just an
blocker.
absolute general. Yeah, I mean, he can catch, throw. He's just all around a really, really solid catcher. And I was spoiled watching him for a couple of years. And just recently, I really like watching Real Muto. Obviously, he's a converted guy, and he doesn't really fit the mold of a normal catcher. He's can be on one knee, can be standing up. He kind of does, whatever the play might be asking is what he puts himself in position to do, and it's fun to watch.
I think one of the things I've always been intrigued about is just guys who make adjustments really quickly. And you kind of hinted at like being able to go to one knee, which is obviously a newer trend and stuff. But I even remember Perez, like in 2016, he really didn't catch Kluber a whole lot during the regular season because Jan Gomes was there. And then Gomes was hurt and Perez jumped in. And I mean, he caught him in the entire World Series and all that. So just that adjustability to be able to get on the same page with someone, I think is really intriguing.
For sure.
So, and then, here's another one. Favorite teammate of all time and why?
That's funny that you talk about Jan Gomes because he was my locker was right next to him first time I got called up, and if I had any questions, it was just follow Jan around. He was a great teammate at a time where everything was kind of brand new to me. Obviously, all the nerves of being in the big leagues for the first time, but he was just a great guy to follow, and there's a reason why he's still in the big leagues right now doing what he's doing. He's an asset to wherever he goes, and he's a great guy.
Nice. And then the last one, this is actually more of an intriguing one for me than maybe our audience. Where do you think the catching position goes in the years ahead? Because there's obviously been a lot of adjustments over the last 10 years, whether it's, guys paying way more attention to framing and us being able to objectively evaluate catchers better. There's obviously talk of like a robotic strike zone. Like where do you think the catching positioning will be in 2030?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell if they do go to the electric strike zone and stuff. I think they're going to put a higher emphasis on guys who can swing the bat and block a little bit, maybe throw. Like you said, receiving is not going to be as important if you don't have a real hand in it. So I think it kind of becomes more of a power-based position, kind of like a corner outfield or a corner infield, where they're kind of willing to give up a little bit on the defensive side for maybe some power or hitability, but it's kind of really hard to say. I don't think it's ever going to get away from still the defensive minded, game calling and things like that, just because of the receiving aspect not being there. I think that's always going to be a really important thing, being behind the plate. So it's kind of hard to tell, but I think that just being adjustable and being able to kind of, like you said, adjust on the fly is going to be huge.
Nice. And then one last personal question. How terrified are you to have 3 teenage daughters at the same time coming up on you? Because I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. I'm gonna definitely enjoy these younger years while they last, because right now, they melt my heart. They're awesome. But we're definitely gonna be coming up on that sooner than later. But at the same time, we'll kind of cross that bridge when we get to it.
It's a baseball thing. Everybody has a lot of girls, and I know you've got a boy as well. But I'm going to do a study on this someday. I think it's 80% daughters across professional baseball.
Jeez.
So we're very outnumbered, but very appreciative though too, because this was awesome. So glad you're able to come on. Folks can find you on Twitter. It's at EHAASE3. Good follow on Twitter. Always celebrating what's great about the game. And hey, it's so awesome to see you having the success you have. You're a great dude, and you put in the work, and it's been fun to watch from afar. And really, really appreciate you coming on and take the time with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.